I'm an event planner, living with my fiancé, Tom, in a cozy little house we bought last year. My life revolves around creating perfect moments for other people, and I thought, for a little while, that I had managed to build a perfect one for myself. But as I've learned, the most devastating storms often gather under the clearest skies, and my storm had a name: Ben, my older brother. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The party was supposed to be the highlight of our year. It was a joint celebration, my parents' 30th wedding anniversary and my engagement to Tom. For weeks, I'd poured my heart and soul into planning it, using every trick of my trade to make it flawless. The garden of our family home was transformed with fairy lights twinkling in the dusk, the scent of roses hanging in the air, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Our closest family and friends milled about, their laughter mingling with the music. Everything was perfect. My mom, Carol, a retired nurse whose gentle hands had soothed countless fevers, now dabbed at happy tears. My dad was beaming, his arm around her, looking every bit the proud husband and father. My younger sister, Emily, an art student with a flair for the dramatic, was capturing it all on her vintage camera. Tom, my rock, a high school teacher with more patience in his little finger than I had in my whole body, never left my side, his hand a warm, steady presence in mine. The only cloud on this perfect horizon was my brother, Ben. At 29, 2 years my senior, Ben worked as a high-flown financial analyst in the city. To the outside world, he was the golden child, handsome, successful, charismatic. He'd always been our parents' pride, the son who could do no wrong. Growing up, I lived in his shadow. He was the one who got the top grades, the one who captained the football team, the one who everyone expected great things from. I was just Ben's little sister, quiet, observant, and perpetually trying to measure up. Even after I'd found my own success and my own happiness with Tom, a part of me still felt that old insecurity prickle whenever Ben was around. That evening, he arrived late, dressed in a designer suit that looked out of place at a relaxed garden party. He carried an air of stressed importance, his eyes constantly darting to his phone. He gave our parents a perfunctory hug and clapped Tom on the shoulder with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry I'm late," he announced to no one in particular. "Big deals don't close themselves." He then proceeded to hold court, charming my aunts and uncles with stories of his high-stakes job, his voice booming over the gentle music. I watched him, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. He had this way of making everything about him, of sucking the air out of a room until he was the only one left breathing. Tom squeezed my hand. "Don't let him get to you," he murmured, his voice a balm on my frayed nerves. I tried, I really did. I focused on the joy of the evening, on the proud look in my parents' eyes, on the beautiful future I was building with Tom. The centerpiece of the evening was the cake, a magnificent, 3-tiered creation I had designed myself, decorated with handcrafted sugar flowers that matched the roses in my mother's garden. It was more than just a cake. It was a symbol of everything we were celebrating: enduring love, new beginnings, and family. As my dad prepared to make a toast, I felt a swell of pure, unadulterated happiness. For a moment, everything was exactly as it should be. My father stood, tapping his glass for attention. The string quartet quieted and a hush fell over the garden. He spoke beautifully, his voice thick with emotion, about his 30 years with my mother. He welcomed Tom to the family with a warmth that brought tears to my eyes. "And to Judy," he finished, raising his glass to me, "who not only organized this incredible party, but has organized our family in the best possible way her whole life. We are so proud of you." My heart felt like it was going to burst. I looked around at the smiling faces, my family, my friends, my future husband. This was it. This was the perfect moment. And then, Ben shattered it, as the guests raised their glasses in a chorus of, "To Judy and Tom, to Carol and John." Ben moved. It happened so fast it was like a blur. He strode to the center of the lawn, a bottle of champagne in his hand. He wasn't raising it for a toast. He shook it violently, his face a mask of furious resentment. "A toast?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the happy murmurs like a shard of glass. "You want to make a toast?" My father's smile faltered. Ben, what are you doing? But Ben wasn't listening. With a wild look in his eyes, he popped the cork. It shot across the garden like a bullet, narrowly missing my aunt's head. Then he tipped the bottle and sprayed champagne everywhere. Not upwards, in a show of celebration, but directly at the head table. A torrent of fizzing liquid soaked the pristine white tablecloth, doused the floral centerpiece, and drenched my parents. My mother gasped, shrinking back as the cold liquid hit her, but he wasn't done. His eyes, burning with a rage I had never seen before, landed on the cake. You want to celebrate? He screamed, his voice cracking. Let's celebrate this. He lunged towards it. I screamed, no! But it was too late. He grabbed the cake stand and threw it. The magnificent three-tiered symbol of our family's happiness went airborne for a split second before crashing to the ground in a sickening heap of sponge, cream, and shattered sugar flowers. Gasps of horror rippled through the crowd. My beautiful cake was a mangled wreck on the grass, a monument to his inexplicable fury. Then he turned on me. He pointed a trembling finger, his face contorted. This is all because of you, he roared. You and your perfect little life. You think you're so much better than me, with your perfect little fiancé and your perfect little party. He took a step towards me, and Tom immediately moved in front of me, a protective shield. Ben, that's enough, Tom said, his voice dangerously calm. You need to leave. For a moment, I thought Ben might actually try to fight him. The air crackled with tension. The silence was absolute, broken only by my mother's quiet sobs. Then, as quickly as it began, the rage seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a sneering contempt. He looked around at the shocked faces, gave a bitter, humorless laugh, and straightened his tie. Fine, he spat. I'm leaving. Enjoy the rest of your perfect party. He turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving a trail of devastation and bewildered silence in his wake. The party was over. The guests, unsure what else to do, offered awkward, mumbled apologies and left in a hurry, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. The beautiful garden now looked like a battlefield. The string quartet had packed up and gone. The fairy lights flickered over the wreckage, the champagne-soaked table, the overturned chairs, and the tragic, trampled remains of the cake. My mother was inconsolable. My father, his face a grim, stony mask, was trying to comfort her, his own suit still damp. Emily was picking up pieces of the shattered cake stand, her face pale with shock. Tom was by my side, his arm wrapped tightly around me, but I felt a million miles away, trapped in a bubble of cold disbelief. What had just happened? Why would Ben do that? The venom in his voice, the pure hatred in his eyes as he'd looked at me, it made no sense. We'd had our sibling rivalries, sure, but this was something else entirely. This was destructive, vicious, and deeply personal. In the days that followed, a thick, suffocating fog of awkwardness settled over our family. No one wanted to talk about what happened. My mother would change the subject whenever I brought it up, her eyes pleading with me to just let it go. He's just under a lot of pressure at work, dear, she'd say, a flimsy excuse that neither of us believed. My father was angry, but his anger was directed at the situation, not at Ben. He retreated into a stoic silence, refusing to discuss it. Ben, of course, had vanished. He didn't answer our calls or texts. It was as if he'd dropped off the face of the earth after detonating a bomb in the middle of our lives. The whispers started subtly. An aunt called, ostensibly to see how I was, but her questions were laced with a pointed curiosity about Ben's troubles. A family friend mentioned hearing that Ben's startup was hitting a rough patch. Little comments, dropped here and there, that painted a picture of Ben as a tragic, misunderstood figure struggling under immense pressure. The narrative was slowly being rewritten, and I was being cast as the oblivious sister who had flaunted her happiness in her struggling brother's face. The blame was shifting from him to me. It was maddening. I had done nothing but try to celebrate our family, and somehow I was becoming the villain of the story. I tried to talk to Emily about it, but even she was hesitant. I don't know, Judy, she said, twisting a paintbrush in her fingers. Ben's been acting weird for months. He's been borrowing a lot of money from Mom and Dad. He told them it was for his business. That was a bombshell. My parents were comfortable, but they weren't wealthy. They had their retirement savings, the nest egg they had worked their whole lives for. The idea of Ben chipping away at that made me feel sick. Something was very, very wrong, and it was clear that no one else was going to find out what it was. If I wanted answers, I would have to find them myself. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and I was determined to see what ugly truths it would unearth. I couldn't let it go. The injustice of it all gnawed at me. Ben's violent outburst, my parents' money, the whispers recasting him as the victim. It was a puzzle, and I was missing the most important pieces. I started with what Emily had told me. My parents had always been notoriously private about their finances, but I knew where they kept their important documents, a locked filing cabinet in my dad's study. It felt like a terrible violation of their trust, but the alternative, letting Ben potentially ruin them, was far worse. One afternoon, when I knew they would be out for hours, I went over to their house. The key was in the same place it had always been, in the little ceramic pot on my dad's desk. My hands trembled as I unlocked the cabinet. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Bank statements, lots of them. I spread them out on the floor, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim determination. The numbers told a horrifying story. Over the past 6 months, there had been a series of large withdrawals. $10,000 here, $15,000 there, a total of over $80,000, all transferred to a single company account. Innovate Solutions, LLC, Ben's startup. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just borrowing a lot of money. This was my parents' life savings. He was draining them dry, but why? His business was supposed to be his ticket to the big time. He'd boasted about landing huge clients and being on the verge of a major breakthrough. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Innovate Solutions, LLC. The company website was slick and professional, full of corporate jargon and stock photos of smiling executives. It listed a prestigious city address and boasted a portfolio of impressive projects. But when I started cross-referencing, things started to fall apart. I searched for the clients he listed. None of them had any public record of working with his company. I looked up the address. It was a virtual office, a mail forwarding service. A deeper search on the company registration portal revealed the truth. Innovate Solutions, LLC had been officially dissolved 3 months ago due to insolvency. It was defunct, dead, bankrupt. The whole thing was a lie, a complete and utter fabrication. He wasn't a high-flying startup founder on the verge of success. He was a failure, and he was dragging our parents down with him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was why he'd exploded at the party. It wasn't about me or my happiness. It was a desperate, panicked lashing out from a man whose world was crumbling around him. My engagement, my parents' pride in me, it had all just been the final match on his very short fuse. He wasn't angry at me for being happy. He was terrified that my success would shine a spotlight on his spectacular failure. He hadn't just smashed a cake. He had tried to smash the image of the perfect family that he could no longer pretend to be a part of. The rage I felt was cold and clear. He had lied to us, stolen from our parents, and tried to make me the scapegoat for his own catastrophic mistakes. He had picked a fight with the wrong person. My grief turned into steely resolve. He wanted a scene? I'd give him a finale he would never forget. My first instinct was to storm over to my parents' house, lay the bank statements out on their kitchen table, and expose Ben for the fraud he was. But I knew that would only cause them more pain. My mother would try to make excuses for him, and my father's heart would break. They didn't deserve that. Ben was the one who deserved to be held accountable, and I needed to do it in a way that would leave him with absolutely no escape route. The anger that had been simmering inside me now had a purpose. I wasn't just going to expose his lies. I was going to dismantle his entire life, piece by fraudulent piece. Tom was my first and only confidant. When I laid out all the evidence for him, the bank statements, the dissolved company records, the fake address, he wasn't surprised. He'd always seen the insecurity lurking beneath Ben's arrogant exterior. He listened patiently, his teacher-like calmness a perfect anchor for my fury. "So what's the plan?" he asked, his eyes telling me he was with me no matter what. "The plan," I said, a grim smile touching my lips, "is to give Ben exactly what he wanted, an audience. My profession had taught me a thing or two about planning and execution. I spent the next 2 weeks in a flurry of quiet, methodical activity. My first target was the extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had heard only Ben's side of the story. I didn't want to just tell them the truth. I wanted them to see it. I compiled a neat, undeniable dossier of evidence. Copies of the bank transfers, a printout of the company's dissolution notice, a screenshot of the virtual office address. I then called a family meeting, ostensibly to clear the air after the disastrous party. My parents were hesitant, but I insisted, telling them it was the only way for the family to heal. Next, I needed to get in touch with Ben. He had been ignoring all of us, so I had to be clever. I used a burner email address to send him a message, posing as a recruiter from a venture capital firm. I wrote that we had been tracking the impressive growth of Innovate Solutions and were interested in discussing a potential 8-figure investment. I knew his ego wouldn't be able to resist. As expected, he replied within the hour, suddenly very eager to talk. We scheduled a preliminary video call for the same day and time as my family meeting. The final piece of the puzzle was my parents. This was the hardest part. I had to tell them the truth before the meeting, but I had to do it gently. I sat them down the night before, the dossier in my hands. I walked them through it step by step, showing them the undeniable proof of Ben's deceit. My mother cried, her tears born of heartbreak and betrayal. My father sat in silence, his face aging 10 years and 10 minutes. The anger was there, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of sorrow. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm going to stop him from hurting anyone else," I replied. "And I'm going to make sure he understands what he's done." I asked for one thing from them, their trust. I asked them to let me handle the meeting my way, without interrupting, no matter what happened. Reluctantly, they agreed. The stage was set. All the actors were in place. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. Our living room was tense. My aunts, uncles, and cousins were all gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. My parents sat on the sofa, looking pale but resolute. Tom was by my side, a quiet pillar of support. A large television screen was mounted on the wall, currently blank. I had told everyone that Ben would be joining us via video link to explain himself. I took a deep breath and stood before them. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I know the last few weeks have been difficult. There's been a lot of confusion and misinformation about what happened at the party, and about Ben. I want to clear that up today." I could see the skepticism on some of their faces. They were expecting a tearful apology or a flimsy excuse. They weren't expecting a trial. On the television screen, a video call notification popped up. I accepted it, and Ben's face filled the screen. He was in a sleek, modern office, clearly a rented meeting room, wearing his most expensive suit. He looked confident, smug, and ready to charm the pants off his supposed investors. He hadn't been told his family would be watching. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Ben Carter from Innovate Solutions. A pleasure to connect with you." "Hello, Ben," I said calmly. "It's Judy." The smug smile vanished from his face, replaced by a flash of panic and confusion. He looked around wildly, as if expecting to see venture capitalists hiding behind my sofa. "Judy, what is this?" "I have an important investment meeting." "No, Ben, you don't," I said, my voice hardening. "There is no investment. There is no meeting, but you do have an audience." I turned my laptop around to show him the room full of our silent, watching family. The color drained from his face. He was trapped. "What is the meaning of this?" he stammered, his composure cracking. "It means the lies stop now," I said. And then, I began. I took them all through the story. Not the one Ben had been spinning, but the real one. I projected the bank statements onto the screen, the $80,000 in withdrawals clear for everyone to see. I showed them the company dissolution certificate dated 3 months prior. I brought up the web page for the virtual office service he'd been using as his corporate headquarters. With every piece of evidence, another layer of his carefully constructed facade was stripped away. The room was utterly silent, save for my mother's quiet sniffles. The family members who had pitied him, who had whispered about his struggles, now stared at the screen with expressions of dawning horror and disgust. Ben was falling apart. "It's not what it looks like," he pleaded, his voice thin and reedy. "I was going to pay them back. The business just hit a temporary snag. I can fix it. Fix it? I shot back, my voice ringing with all the anger I had suppressed. Fix the fact that you stole our parents' retirement savings? Fix the fact that you built your entire life on a foundation of lies? You didn't smash that cake because you were under pressure, Ben. You did it because you couldn't stand to see the rest of us happy, while your own fake world was collapsing. I turned to the family. He wanted to make a scene, I said, my voice dropping. He wanted to ruin our celebration, all because he couldn't face the consequences of his own choices.
I looked back at the screen, at the pathetic, broken man who was my brother. The party's over, Ben. I disconnected the call, plunging the screen into blackness. The silence in the room was deafening. It was finally, truly, over. The aftermath of the toast of truth was not explosive, but a slow, painful process of healing and rebuilding. There were no more whispers, no more pity for Ben. The truth, in all its ugly detail, was out. My extended family, one by one, came to me and my parents, offering their support. The charade was over. My father, in a move that I knew must have torn him apart, took legal action. It wasn't about sending his son to jail, but about legally forcing him to be accountable for the money he had taken. A payment plan was established, a long, arduous road for Ben to repay every single cent he had stolen from their future. Ben became a ghost in our family. He didn't fight the legal proceedings. He simply accepted them with a defeated emptiness. He lost his fancy apartment, his designer suits, and the respect of everyone he had ever known. The last I heard, he was working a low-level admin job, living in a small rented room on the other side of the country. He had to start from scratch, not as the golden child, but as a man forced to confront the wreckage he had made of his life. I don't know if he ever felt true remorse, but he was certainly living with the consequences. My relationship with my parents changed. The crisis, as painful as it was, broke down the old dynamics. I was no longer Ben's little sister. I was Judy, the one who had seen the truth and had the strength to bring it into the light. My parents started to lean on me, to ask for my opinion, to treat me not just as a daughter, but as an equal. My mum and I became closer than ever, bonded by the shared pain and the slow process of mending our family's heart. My father, though still saddened by the loss of the son he thought he knew, looked at me with a new kind of pride, one that was deeper and more meaningful than any he had ever shown before. A year later, Tom and I got married. It wasn't a huge, lavish affair. It was a small, intimate ceremony in the same garden where the disastrous party had taken place. This time, there were no secrets, no underlying tensions. The fairy lights twinkled, the roses smelled just as sweet, and the air was filled with genuine, uncomplicated joy. As I stood there, holding Tom's hand, surrounded by the people who truly loved and supported me, I looked at my family, my strong, resilient parents, my creative, loyal sister, and I realized this was our new family portrait. It was smaller, and it had its scars, but it was real. And for the first time in a very long time, it was perfect.